hand over to Elena. So Elena Ra, who will introduce herself as part of the WSP team who we've brought on to work alongside our existing internal team and GHD on doing the this additional piece of work that was requested in the resolution when the decision was made to progress option A for the long-term consent. We also committed to having another look at the long list and the options that were considered and doing some more engagement with the community and with Mana Whenua and yourselves. So Elena is leading that engagement process for us. So she's prepared a presentation. She's just going to run that through with you. It's based on what I think you kindly termed the octopus approach. And so what we've done now is work through that in more detail with the internal team, with the WSP team, what that would involve to deliver the various elements of that. So Elena's going to talk that through with you and get your feedback and input into that before we launch into it. So I'll hand over to you, Elena, to introduce yourself and get into it.
Kapo. Thanks, Penny. Kia ora koutou. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes,
excellent. Kapo, that's always a very good start. For those of you who I haven't met before, wonderful to see you today. So I'm a Technical Director of Infrastructure Advisory at WSP, and I also chair the Māori Advisory to the Infrastructure Commission. So they're two of my key roles day to day. As Penny has introduced, we've had a number of conversations in recent weeks about how we can proceed this work to achieve what you were hoping to through the resolution. What I'm going to do is just share screen with you, and hopefully that will run smoothly and take you through a quick presentation of how we are proposing to proceed with this work at this stage. Now, hopefully that's gone full screen for you all.
Yeah.
Great, perfect. So I'm sure I don't need to brief you on what your resolution was, but obviously WSP is here to give effect to that resolution by basically independently facilitating a structured and transparent engagement process with the elected members in front of me today, with Mana Whenua and the broader community to support Council's consideration of wastewater disposal options out of Shotover. Very quick refamiliarisation with the octopus. Which I do think we might need to find another name for very soon. Obviously, we have the business case that's previously been prepared. That went through a process of option identification, taking the work from a long list down to a short list. Through that process, it seems that it's become evident that some of those engagement opportunities maybe weren't as full as they could have been, particularly with Mana Whenua, the Community Council, and now the new CCO board that has been stood up. So our intention is to find a process to give effective agency to these groups to understand how the long list and short list were derived, make sure that we're asking good questions of GHD as to how they arrived at those conclusions, and basically independently facilitate an opportunity for discourse and discussion on that work that has been prepared. So the facilitated process, given the timeframes that is remaining to do this work, is somewhat complex and condensed. And we've done our best to try and structure a process that works with the council calendars, which we know are largely locked in for the remainder of the year, as well as starting to understand the availability of the CCO, Mana Whenua, and any other potential groups or individuals that may contribute to this. So to make this as clean as possible for you to follow, we've got QLDC, yourselves, we've got the CCO, we've got the local rūnaka that includes the positions and perspectives of all 7 rūnaka, and trying to find a really efficient and effective way to get their input. It includes broader community engagement, and we've also got some suggestions around some potential extra expertise that could be really valuable to have through this process. What we would like to do is basically start by WSP going through the business case that's been prepared and getting into a room with GHD and starting to have a bit of internal challenge around how the long list and short list were derived. What was the methodology? How was the MCA structured? How was the scoring undertaken? We'd like to do that as a really robust trust building exercise where we can ask hard questions, but also start to anticipate the types of questions that we may get from participants. After we've had that internal challenge, the plan is to basically start with yourselves, with counsellors, looking at an open book review of the work that GHD has done. This is where we anticipate that they would come along, basically give an overview of the processes they went through. They would sort of step to the side and WSP would open up a reflection and inquiry session. We would facilitate, GHD would listen. If requested, GHD could ask questions in that session, but basically we're there to, I guess, have that first early challenge, early inquiry into the work that was undertaken, ask good questions. We plan on doing a similar process for the CCO and hopefully within similar timeframes, although are yet to start this discussion with them on their availability. After that first stage is complete, what we intend to do is go back. So the blue boxes you'll see is sort of the behind the scenes workings. Red is when we're face to face. We'd like to go back behind the scenes and do a technical gap analysis of what we heard from those early inquiries. So starting to unpack and unpick where the business case maybe took a certain direction, questions that previously maybe hadn't been asked or require further inquiry, or opportunities that hadn't been thought about. The intention after that, to basically generate some responses to the early inquiry questions, would be to come back into some future thinking challenge workshops. Now, there is an opportunity here to potentially to combine across the QLDC and the CCO groups for efficiency, or we could leave them separately as we've shown here. But basically, this future thinking challenge workshop is where we go a bit more broader. Blue sky might be a bit of a stretch, but really starting to get some really robust discussion regarding the responses to the questions that were asked in that early inquiry. After that, we'd be looking to basically take as much information from those conversations as possible, analyse, synthesise and document that, all of which would be WSP work solely. And then going back to those members who participated in those facilitated processes, doing some checking to make sure that what we've heard and documented was accurate to their perspectives, and then we would move towards basically preparing the final reporting. Now that process is sort of the broader overarching structure for council and the CCO. What we see as being slightly different for Karunaka is that we anticipate that it's very likely from some early conversations that I have had with the Runaka that they would stand up a subject matter expertise group, likely to be possibly around 5 individuals who come from technical backgrounds that can, I suppose, understand the type of infrastructure problem that we're looking at, start to do some broader thinking that aligns with that infrastructure and mana whenua outcomes, and have some really good input into the facilitated re-inquiry. So we think that that group could likely be stood up very imminently, and that could also then be followed by a site visit, which hopefully could be timed around similar timing to the mana to mana, which is planned for early August. After this, we anticipate the process to be very similar to the first 2 groups, where we have the open book session for inquiry and then a future challenge workshop. The community section is slightly different. As most of you will be aware, we are looking at having a community deliberative poll, and one of the most critical aspects in that is actually generating really good questions and working out how that methodology is going to be structured. So that's something that needs to happen imminently and is actually underway to a certain extent. This will be managed through QLDC's strategy team with support by WSP. And then we'll actually be planning for some form of open day, which can allow people to come and participate and see how the wastewater treatment plant operates, and then basically moving towards a poll. Now, the findings of that poll will also go into those last 2 blue columns, which will be the content and data that is analysed and synthesised. What we aren't yet too sure about is whether we would have a member checking and validation process in that. It's probably unlikely and uncommon in a poll, and we'll probably move straight towards reporting. Now, the last pillar is a pillar that is a suggestion that's come from myself. and we're really open to some discussion today around whether this is something that could be useful. And that would be the appointment of a local infrastructure and environmental experts group. So we're thinking sort of a 5 to 8, 5 to 10 max group of individuals who are based locally, who have broader understanding of major complex infrastructure problems. They could come from a background in the infrastructure industry, they could come from a different sector, and potentially are even working fly in, fly out to another location, but understand Queenstown and understand complex infrastructure problems. If we were to stand up a group like this, we're thinking it would run a similar process in the beginning to that what we would run with Mana Whenua. So we would appoint that group, undertake a site visit, but what we're actually planning is a truncated process. We would basically go into an open book and challenge session all at once. The reason that we've done that in this instance is basically we're working to the assumption that there's a high degree of comprehension around infrastructure solutioneering and also a high degree of professionalism where these types of individuals can get into a really complex problem workshop really quickly and effectively. We would still continue through to analyse and synthesise the data that we gather from that, and we would still undertake member checking and make sure that that was an accurate reflection of those conversations. I'm just wondering, and Tony, Penny, keen for your thoughts on this, whether we would like some discussion on that before I jump into what that could look like as a program, or I can jump straight into program now if we're comfortable.
I think it'd be good to get reflections and feedback on it now. So the next part that Elena will run through is the timing and how these fit together. So if you have questions about that, maybe hold those, but just any thoughts on the approach and content and the different groups would be useful, I think, to get at the stage.
I think it looks great. I'm just and I like the poll because I was worried about the time frame and the deliberative democracy holding everything up. I think this looks amazing. What I'm interested in is landowners and how we get the information about land. You know, where does that fit into it? What's that?
What are you telling me?
Well, just are there opportunities that we're not seeing? Is there, and look, there may not, you can just tell me that just doesn't work.
I anticipate that GT will have information around land types and land areas,
Yeah.
and topologies and stuff, but I don't think we've gone to the level of talking to individual land owners.
And that probably doesn't matter because that could be a next step. But I just in terms of making assumptions, because obviously it's about land. If we make assumptions about, well, that's not available, that would cost that through the process. How do we avoid making incorrect assumptions as we go through the process? About
We're ready for a later in terms of
that's all. I don't need answers or anything. I just thought I'd raise that because that's a big problem as we make assumptions about cost and availability and possibility.
Maybe Elena can respond to that.
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good suggestion. One of the things that we'll be working with GHD on in that internal challenge session right at the beginning is what data and information we need to have as baseline available for each of these groups so that we can actually move really effectively through the process. But what I'll do is make some notes there around what that would look like, what information is available. I anticipate that the owner, there'll be a certain degree of ownership information that we'll be able to collect. We're unlikely to have land values, I think, tied to that, but let me talk to both GHD and WSP to see what we could have available as baseline data in that regard.
And I think the assumptions in terms of, I think what you're worried about based on listening to the previous workshops and meetings was that we've taken things off the table because of assumptions about use or value or whatever of particular land parcels. So that's part of the internal challenge, and that will come through when you have the first sessions about the open book review and reflection inquiry. That's where you can ask those questions and you can get answers to that in terms of where assumptions have or haven't been made, and it can be worked through from there.
And I guess the other thing, just finally on that, is what opportunities might some landowners see in this? I mean, maybe none would see any, but are we missing an angle in that someone may see that as if you treat it to the standard, it could irrigate, that could solve my problem, you know, possibly not in this district, but that's kind of the thinking that I just don't want to miss.
You better raise that.
You'll be able to raise that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Really like the structure. It's great intuition, and it's cool to see the thinking and all the different stakeholders. I agree with those, you know, local individual experts that have stake in the matter, initiative that you've got there too. One of the things I was just going to comment is I do think it'd be fun to include the CCO and QLDC together in those future thinking challenge workshops, mainly because I think not just efficiency, it's good for us to unpick how they value things and also to co-design that together, given that we're going through a transition period, so that we understand how each other thinks and we sort of build it together. And obviously it's more efficient. So.
Good opportunity. I tend to agree with that because by the time you're getting to those, we're getting, pretty close to, we'll only be 6-8 months out. Yeah.
Yes.
There's a big decision.
Yeah.
Shall we?
Yep. I think it's great. Well done on getting something done so quickly. And yeah,
Maybe, Karen, I know in terms of we're going to really quickly really try and go because of the, but yeah, there's some good stuff coming up.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, any other feedback before I move on to what that could look like as a program?
Well, just another positive nod to it. I think it's great. It's inclusive, comprehensive, and it's moving us in the direction that we wanted to go. So, good on you.
Okay, great. Okay, that's really helpful. Righto, so if we were looking at what that looks like as a time frame, now this is where it gets a little bit more complex and challenging, and hopefully you can follow what looks a little bit like snakes and ladders. So we've got our same participant groups running down the left-hand side, and then we've got a calendar, a truncated calendar, intentionally from July through till November. Now, part of that truncation is because we'd like to leave December partially as contingency, but also really, ideally, this work would be wrapped up around around mid-December. That gave us, we're at about a 17-week program if we look at it through to mid-December. So I'll work line by line. So a couple of these dates are already locked in, particularly for yourself. So we've got the 30th of July open book session where we would present and have early inquiry. We'd then go away back into the room with GHD around middle of August and start to do some of that gap analysis and testing. And then we'd come back for that future thinking workshop around the 1st of September. That's probably the most straightforward item at this stage. We can hopefully align that with the CCO, particularly if we can get the CCO into agreement for that 1st of September tentative date that's been locked in for that challenge workshop, if that's how we'd like to proceed with combining those. Now, the mana whenua karunaka piece is slightly more complex, but what we're hoping is that we've got a good head start on this. One of the things I didn't mention at the beginning is that I whakapapa Te Kāti Hui Rapaki Puketeraki, and I've also been a lead person in a number of kaitahu's responses to fast track processes at the moment. So what we've been doing in those processes is standing up a group similar to what we're talking about here, where we have a small cluster of subject matter experts who basically come together, will read through all the existing contexts. They'll come in their professional roles, but with a mana whenua lens to the work that they're undertaking. I have had early conversations with Shane Ellison and Edward Ellison about me taking on this work. They're both familiar with that. They're both familiar with that I would like to propose this form of structure for this work as well. And they've given an early indication that that's what they would be comfortable with. So what we're thinking is we could lock that in as a process in the next couple of weeks. Then we could move towards the mana to mana, which we do see as being quite separate, but inherently connected to this kaupapa. So we know that mana to mana will cover much broader topics. It'll go from all different types of infrastructure. It'll hone into three waters. Shot over is bound to come up in that. But what we'd like to do is have you well prepared for that as well. So we'd like to take any early insights that we're hearing from mana whenua or what we've heard historically from mana whenua to be basically coming to you in a form of briefing note, I suppose, so that you're well prepared for that mana to mana conversation. Then what we'd like to do is move to a site visit early August so that that group is basically stood up pre-mana to mana and ready to go as soon as mana to mana has been undertaken, looking at probably a mid-August open book and then hopefully a mid-September challenge workshop. The community poll is somewhat constrained in how we manage this. So we're in that question generation stage at the moment. We're working quite closely with the S&A team at QLDC. We're already having some input into what those questions could look like. Open day likely to be somewhere in August, potentially September, and then we've got the poll running, actually sorry, that should say September, for the poll running through October. Now, one of the reasons that that's a little bit challenging is we want to get it early enough that we can have the chance to do really good data analytics that comes out of that, but we don't want to have it so early that it's not informed by all of the other discussions that we've been having between QLDC, the CCO and Runaka to generate really good questions that go into it. So that one's a bit of a moving beast at the moment as we try to navigate what the broader program looks like. And then the last one would be with the infrastructure and environmental experts group. Again, hopefully moving towards standing up an SME group sort of late July. That might be quite ambitious. One of the things that I'd like to discuss today, if we can, is whether we would like to move forward with that group and how we would like to go about a process that's really ethical and appropriate for looking at who those participants might be. And what ideas there are around the table, or what process we should go through to determine those individuals. That last line item of those experts could move slightly to the right if it needed to. What we wouldn't want it doing is pushing out basically past the last date, which is the mana whenua timing dates. So ideally, if it could run in sequence with, but not after those mana whenua dates. And then we've basically left ourselves late October and November, December for write-up. So any queries and questions on that?
Oh, it's a lot to get through, but I'm glad that you're leading it. It feels like you're magnum opus in a lot of ways, which is great.
Yeah, opus is the competition.
No, magnum opus. It's the combination of everything you work towards into one place.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it's great.
I'm interested in the community poll question generation and exactly what that means and how that will be followed through to the poll. And presumably there's questions to be asked that need to be answered before they can answer the poll.
Yes. Penny, I wonder, do you want to talk about that at all, given some of those conversations that have been had with the I suppose, provider of that guidance?
The questions are more the questions that are asked in the poll. So this is how we are determining what the questions are that you ask. So a poll is it's kind of like a mini citizens assembly in that it's only run over 1 or possibly 2 days, but it's not just a survey you send out to people. You select a group of people using a representative method.
Yeah.
You bring them in. You run through materials with the experts. You still have the information booklets. It's just less information over a shorter. You do it over 1 weekend essentially.
Okay.
So the details of how that will work will come back to the Asset and Infrastructure Committee. It won't just be done over here
I think to me the question generation bit is really, really important.
Yep.
Because if we don't inform that piece with the internal challenge, but basically we could be saying the only thing you can do is afford this, so pick this.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be really careful about that because, and will we have enough information early on to make sure we do ask the right?
Yeah,
That's right.
I think it's worth us all thinking about what are going to be the main asks essentially.
Interested in that process.
Yeah, so I think there is when's the next Asset and Infrastructure Committee? In a couple of weeks.
I'm looking at my
August. Yes, in August. And so I'll come back to you on that, but I'm pretty sure that's coming to you.
Because I feel like this is bigger than asset and infrastructure. I feel like this is quite.
That's right.
Oh,
yeah. Everyone's excited. Just using that.
I think the input experts local, absolutely fantastic, and I think from a point of view of we have some amazing brains in the district, as we know, what comes on the screen. So it's how we do that. I think getting the right people quickly is key. And of course, it's how we do that, how we decide to do the right people up, how we don't get bogged down in a big lengthy procurement time. I would like to think there'll be maybe we're shoulder tapping, right? Because we've got some good indications of who the people are in the community. I don't know, but I think there's enough knowledge around the organisation to think about who some of those people might be?
Yeah, so I think Elena is we are looking for a bit of guidance on whether you are happy for a more of a shoulder tapping type approach, or whether you want to go through a more formal kind of expressions of interest process. I think what would be a good idea is for Elena to put together a bit of
A bit of a methodology.
and a bit of a matrix about the types of skills you want on there. So you want a mix of environmental infrastructure. But I think you're right that probably between staff and councillors, we can come up with a list to then discuss.
Yeah.
If that's what you're happy with.
That's one we need to get Elena to complete her.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, yep, sure.
Because they did a little ground to cover off. So Elena, next.
No, that's fine. And I'll just make a note there that to ease up on some of those procurement requirements, one of the things we could do is have them come through WSP as the doorway, if that eases up some of that process requirement too. So we just keep that in mind.
I guess there's a question about that, Elena. I might have missed this in what we've talked about so far about whether these are people who are coming together to do this out of the goodness of their heart, or if these are people who are going to pay to do this. So you have? Yes. Oh, we haven't. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
So
okay, I can put some. That sounds good. Okay, so the last slide that we have here is really starting to talk about guardrails. And when I'm speaking to guardrails, I'm talking about what is on the table, off the table when we go into these facilitated conversations with participants. I actually think this is one of the most critical aspects of this work, given the complexity of it and given the nature of the business case that's been produced. So what we've decided at this stage, and I'm very open to your feedback on, is what is in scope for conversation with participants. So mana whenua, stakeholder and community input, and obviously yourselves, on wastewater disposal options, trade-offs and decision criteria, including, so first one, disposal options for treated water from the existing Shotover wastewater treatment plant, identification and consideration of reasonably practicable alternative disposal options, including land-based and hybrid land-water options, consideration of whether additional disposal options should be assessed before Council's March 2027 decision, and information gathering and reporting to support Council's March 2027 decision on long-term disposal solutions. Now, what we're trying to do here, just to be really overt about it, is making sure that we've got a really good opportunity to question and think about how we've got to the solutions that we have at the moment that we're putting through consenting, but not necessarily undermine the process that's been undertaken unless there actually is any validity in that. So we're trying to go broader, but not so blue sky that we start to see everything that's almost what you'd say out of scope on the right-hand side here. So at the moment, what we've got is out of scope is the broader wastewater strategy and policy matters, including centralisation or decentralisation of the wastewater network, future wastewater treatment plant location decisions. What is also out of scope is water services, CCO strategic planning, the rerunning or rebuilding the existing business case, and provision of recommendations, opinions, or technical advice on the business case. So just with that, so WSP sees ourselves as being completely objective and impartial in this process. We don't see ourselves necessarily here as rewriting a business case or providing technical advice on the business case. We see GHD as being open book in regards to the questions they would answer about that. But this table is seeking to manage blue sky thinking alongside options for disposal, and really keen for some questions on that.
My question would be, if you go back to the other side, that what is in scope is whether additional disposal options should be assessed. Now, the problem that we have is that we need to progress with something in order to make a deadline by December 2027. If we're getting to the point where this is about whether we should consider other options, and in March where, do you know what I mean? If the output is yes, you should, is it then too late to do it? That's my question. And if it's not, fine. If it is, why are we doing this? And if it is, we need to broaden the scope.
So at the time we made this decision, the advice was that if this process ends up saying that we've not chosen the right one, then Council's got the option to withdraw that. And
we won't know whether we've chosen the right one, because the question is consideration of whether additional options should be assessed. Now, we'll get to the point where we haven't assessed any other options, therefore we don't know if we've made the right choice or not. You see, there's a subtle difference there, and I just,
Yeah.
you know, given that we've got WSP in the room, given that they've got the expertise, given that you're going to have, we're paying these people to look at this stuff, why would we not put in scope consideration of other options that might, that then when you get to the end of the process, you've got more certainty around what those potential options might be and whether it is worth, because at that point we would have to then seek from the court to delay the December deadline. Do you see?
Maybe Elena, response to that?
Yes, yeah. So look, WSP absolutely do have the capability, both in business casing and in wastewater engineering, to contribute. Our understanding was more giving the opportunity for those independent groups to have agency in the process, and we will absolutely prompt discussion. We will give perspectives on some of the solutions that have been noted. And so whilst I'll be sort of fronting that process, the two key people that will be sitting behind me is a woman named Juanita Ali, who is our business case expert, and Isabel Bentley, who is our wastewater engineer. And I'm seeing them as my advisors, basically, to make sure that we're asking hard questions, lifting up every rock, no stone goes unturned. But we hadn't intended that we would be providing advice or rewriting aspects of the business case.
Yeah.
So I think the differentiating factor here isn't that that won't be done, it's that it won't be done by WSP. So if this work says there are two other reasonably practical alternatives that weren't considered,
Yeah.
then they'll be rerun by GHD and our internal team and presented to you as part of this process. So GHD are still the people who are doing the technical work. WSP is providing an objective kind of overview of whether there are additional options that haven't been considered, as well as, like, you're also going to be going through the assumptions and the assessment criteria. And if through that it's identified that we need to do more work, that work will get done, because what the resolution requires by March 2027 is that you decide what the option is. It's just that this work being done by WSP isn't all of the work.
It's a parallel piece of work where GHD will keep working based on the stuff that's coming out of this process at the same time.
Yes.
Okay.
So just jumping back in here and looking at that technical gap analysis space, that's where we see, I think we're allowing quite a generous time frame in the middle where we would actually be, GHD won't be under instruction from us, but we will certainly be saying, hey, we lifted up that rock, there's something missing there, we need you to go away and interrogate that process that was undertaken, and we need you to think about it this way. And they need to provide those answers so that we can move into that challenge workshop really effectively as a result.
That's great. It just has to be a meaningful process. There's no point going through the exercise if we can't change our mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I can certainly see the logic between what's in scope, what's out of scope.
Yeah.
And you know, I think it will be, what do we learn along the process that's you know about the assumptions that could or should have been made. That's
Just think there's definitely things that you'll learn through this process in terms that will inform the longer term strategy in terms of centralisation, decentralisation as well. But that work will get picked up by the Helen and her team and the Water Services CCO as they go into the next stage of planning.
Yeah.
We do need to be careful to keep them separate, because otherwise, you know, this process will never get to an end.
I just think we need to soften the out of scope. The last bullet point, provision of opinions on the business case. I mean, that's what we're doing. We are actually unpicking some of the assumptions of the business case, and I no doubt there would be some opinions of. I just don't want to constrain you too much with that last bullet point, personally, because I think it goes a little bit far.
Sure.
But up to everybody else. But okay, thank you.
Do you have anything else, Elaine?
No, I don't think so. That's everything at my end. What I can do is I can go away and, as I've spoken with Tony and Penny about, we'll now formalise this up into a scope of how we'll undertake the work, and that'll give greater detail as well around these steps that will be made available to all of you as needed.
nice, right?
Thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you.
And we will send out to you the alongside that overall timing, the timing of when we've got workshops to come back to you.
Perfect.
Thank you very
I'll jump
much.
off then, team.
Thanks.
Yeah,
guys.
thanks, Elaine.
Thanks so much.
Do we need to know roughly what this is